So welcome to this week's Optimum Health Clinic Facebook Live. And this week I wanted to take a question which comes up, I think, for a lot of people at certain points on the recovery path, which is when you feel like you've tried everything and it feels like you're stuck and it feels like everything you try just doesn't seem to work. In fact, if I had a penny for everyone that had said to me on their first appointment, I feel like I've already tried everything on the recovery path, then I'd be a richer man. I am now, let's say it like that. Joking aside, I think it's often a reflection of feeling stuck and feeling like we've invested emotion, investing hope, invested expectation in a number of things that it feels like haven't helped us and haven't worked. And I think it's worth saying that often people with ME, chronic fatigue fibromyalgia, can be accused by other people of being negative and of being cynical about trying things. People will say, have you tried this thing? And people respond by saying, I've tried something similar. And people will say, well, you need to be positive. And the thing that I always try to explain to people is when you've tried a lot of things that haven't worked and you've invested a lot of hope and expectation in things and then experience the disappointment on the other side, like you get your hopes up, then they crash on the other side when something doesn't help you. After a while, you start to want to protect yourself from the disappointment. So it's not that people are negative, it's people have been, in some ways, they've been burnt by being, quote unquote, too positive too many times. They want to protect themselves from disappointment. And, after a while, it can feel like I've tried all these things that are supposed to have helped me, that have either helped me to a point or haven't helped, or indeed in some instances might have made us feel worse, that it feels like we've tried everything. So what would I say in response to someone that is saying that? So the first thing I would say is it can definitely feel like we've tried everything, but the truth is we haven't tried everything. We haven't tried everything, firstly, because there are so many different perspectives and angles and ways of coming at it that you just simply couldn't have gone through all those things. But also, things are always evolving. People will come into Optimum Health Clinic and say, I feel like I've tried everything. And then there'll be a whole bunch of things that have evolved in the last 1, 2, 3 years that they just weren't even aware of. Now, that doesn't mean that, therefore, because things are always evolving, we always have all the answers. I'm always the first to say we don't have all the answers. We have a lot of answers and we have some very good answers, but nobody has all the answers because ME, chronic fatigue fibromyalgia, is a highly complex group of illnesses that's always is always evolving in our understanding of and affects different people in different ways. Also to put it, the kind of more provocative response I used to say is to say, well, what was it like on the mountain? And people say, well, what do you mean was it like on the mountain? Well, the mountain that you sat on and you stayed in a total state of meditation for 10 years, what was it like? Because I never did that. It sounded like a really fun thing to do. I never did it. And people often look at me with a look of kind of irritation and frustration. But the point is that there are just so many different nuances, perspectives, ways of coming at it, that as much as we can feel like we've tried everything, it just isn't a factually accurate statement to say that, even if that's how emotionally how it feels. It's also true to say there are different stages to the path of recovery. And I'm sure we'll do a Secrets Live on the stage of recovery at some point. There's also some videos on our YouTube channel and stuff on different places that we've done. But the point is that things that help at one stage can be actually not help or actually have negative impact on other stages. So for example, a more kind of pacing graded exercise approach at the reintegration stage, the latter parts of stage 3, can sometimes be quite helpful. At stage 1, it's the worst possible thing that you can do. So it might be that you've done some of the best things that could possibly help your recovery path, but you've done them at the wrong stage. Or you've approached them in such a way that the way you approached it became unhelpful. For example, let's say that you have been doing a detox program and someone says, how was the detox program? You say, I just felt terrible. All my symptoms were significantly worsened. It took me ages to kind of get through it, and I just felt like crap. And then we break it down, and you are actually approaching that detox program from the point of view of the achiever. So rather than very carefully and incrementally every third day increasing a tiny bit, and then if you've got detox symptoms, dropping back the dose and kind of increasing supplements in the incredibly careful way that we recommend, that you just pushed it too hard, too fast on your body, and that's why it had the impacts that it had. Or indeed your body wasn't yet strong enough to do that kind of detox program. Perhaps certain things had to be built up in advance of that. So there's a lot of intricacy and complexity to not just the actual what you do, but the how you do it and the when you do it. And those can be as important as the what of what you're actually doing. Just taking a little bit further also what I was saying about if you're coming at it from a kind of achiever perspective, we talk about in our OHC and me solving the puzzle kind of pamphlet, which forms the kind of core part of our information pack. We talk about subtypes, stages, and systems. And that's often a model that when I'm working with people, often that's the model one of the models within which I think what subtypes are happening, what stage of recovery is this person at, and which systems appear to be affected. So if you think about it from that point of view, what subtypes, if you've got the right what, but you are doing it from an achiever, or you've got a big helper pattern where you're placing too much energy on trying to support other people and not taking care of yourself, or there is a significant toxicity thing that's going on and you've got the right what in something, but you need to address that kind of first, you need to deal with those predisposing factors or subtypes. By the way, as I continue to talk a bit more about this, if this is not familiar, you can go to theoptimumhealthclinic.com and you can request a free information pack, and it's completely free, and it's a really neat visual way of just breaking down what I'm talking about here. But anyway, the first thing is subtypes. Second thing is stages, which I talked about, 3 stages of recovery and making sure you're doing the right interventions for the right stage. We talk about systems. If, for example, you are doing the best psychology work and you are absolutely in a healing state, you've cracked maladaptive stress response, all that stuff is going really well, but you've got significant mitochondrial function issues because you've got blockages in your ATP cycle, however much psychology you do, it ain't going to fix the fact that you've got something that needs addressing in a different system. Or indeed, if you've got digestive symptoms, even if your maladaptive stress response and history of anxiety was a predisposing factor in your digestion, it probably wasn't the only predisposing factor. You could do the best psychology in the world, but if you don't deal with the fact that you've got things happening in your digestion, and either you need to look at things like HCl to help break down protein, or need to look at gut bacteria, or you need to look at food irritants. If you're not dealing with those things, you can deal with the effects of those symptoms with psychology, but you ain't going to fix them with psychology. Equally, if you've got significant stress patterns which are driving your adrenals and your endocrine system, you can take all the adrenal supplements in the world, but until you actually deal with a factor that's impacting on that, then you're just you're supporting a system, but you're not taking the load off the system. So you can feel like you've tried everything, but the trouble is, it just ain't that simple. And I wish it was that simple, but it isn't. And that is part of what makes the job of being a practitioner incredibly challenging, but also fascinating, because we really do see every patient we work with as a puzzle. And we have to find the right the right pieces for the puzzle. We have to put them in the right place, the right kind of how, I guess you could say, at the right time, the right when, for that puzzle to start to build and start to come together. And when you feel like you've tried everything, you probably worked phenomenally hard on your recovery. You may have spent money you didn't really have and caused additional pressure in terms of that side of it. You might have spent you know, I mean, God, I really had very, very little interest in biology and nutrition and food. The psychology side, I hated it initially, then I fell in love with it, and that was always easier for me. But it wasn't very easy doing the work on myself. I had appetite and interest. But in terms of the nutrition side, I just didn't. And, you know, it was very frustrating to spend a lot of time researching something, trying something, and then to realize that it hadn't quite worked, and then I'd have to re-engineer and rethink about it, and, you know, be the captain of the ship of your own recovery is the way I talk about it now. But sometimes I did not want to captain that bloody ship, just to be kind of frank about it. So, yeah, just kind of going back to this question, what if you feel like you've tried everything? Firstly, it might feel like you've tried everything, and the truth is probably you haven't. Secondly, you need to understand that things are always evolving. Things are always changing. There are always new ideas, new perspectives. You know, I look back at things that Optimum Health Clinic was doing a decade ago, and there are certain things we were doing a decade ago. Like I mentioned earlier, mitochondrial function. We were one of the first clinics, certainly in the country, and probably one of the first in the world, that were really looking at mitochondrial function in ME, chronic fatigue fibromyalgia. Dr. Sarah Myhill was one of the pioneers of that in this country. So there are things I look back and I go, wow, we were really ahead of the curve. And I think we've always been good at being ahead of the curve, but the curve's also changed. And there are other things I look back on and I think, God, do we really do it that way? You know, just on the psychology side, you know, the area that I specialize more on, you know, we didn't identify the achiever pattern for the first 3 years of working with people. So we had a whole bunch of people that made recoveries and went back and recreated the whole thing and crashed and relapsed. And, you know, we learned from that. And of course, I have some regret that we didn't learn that faster. But, you know, we learned it when we learned it. And of course, that then evolves and changes the protocol since then. So anyway, things evolve and things change. You then want to look at your subtypes. You want to look at what stage of recovery you're at and are you doing the right things at the right stage. You want to look at the systems that are impacted. And that really can be a puzzle because it isn't always clear kind of which systems are pivotal. Because if you affect one system, you're going to affect the other systems, but which is the one that if you address that, it's going to have the biggest impact on all the others. And, you know, we get better at that, but we don't have that perfect. And if after however many thousands of patients we've done, and therefore how many tens of thousands of consultations we've done, if we don't have that locked down perfectly, then I would argue with anyone else that thinks that they do. That's not to say that I think we're the best at everything we do. I think we're the best at some things and we're bloody good at some other things and we're learning on some other things. But it's complex. And that isn't, you know, that isn't fair. I always say to people, you have absolutely the right to be angry and pissed off and resentful and you don't deserve this and it's not your fault and it shouldn't be happening. And those emotions are valid and often it's important to make time to feel and digest those. And living in that place doesn't really change anything. You know, we also have to find a place to have some acceptance and find some peace in terms of where we are as well. That's not always easy. And you can't force that process. Often we need some support to that process. But the more we can find some place of peace, that of course supports the whole healing process as well. So, yeah, just the other thing, one more thing I'm going to say, and then if you guys want to, I'm going to be around for another 5 minutes or so. If people want to post a few questions, and I'm happy to answer them. And specific questions around this would be great. So, yeah, maladaptive stress response. Is another piece of this jigsaw, which is that sometimes you can be doing seemingly the right subtypes at the right stage and the right systems, but your system's just not in a healing state. And until you get in a healing state, it's almost like nothing is going to be that effective. So that's also a key part that I missed. I was looking back at my notes. A key part that I missed that I think is important is just making sure for your body to heal, your body has to be in a healing state. The analogy that I use, it's like the body will heal itself. You get a cut, and in fact, you can see on the camera, I cut my finger cut 10 days ago or something. I was cutting some pineapple and cut the wrong way and literally sliced, you know the details, it was pretty gruesome. And wrapped in massive bandages and kept on bleeding for most of the day. But anyway, the interesting thing is that like just watching that healing process over the last 10 days or so, and it's like it was kind of numb at the end and it heals more and more to the point that it's like it's got a little bit of a kind of mark on it, but all the sensations back. So the body naturally heals. There's a natural capacity to do that. It's not always the question of what causes us to get sick. That's part of it. It's also what stops us healing. One of the things that can really stop healing is the body not being in a healing state. It's almost like having a bar of soap poured under the bath. You let go, it naturally floats up. And we want to look at the things that are pulling it away from being in a state of healing. And yeah, being in a stress state is obviously a part of that. And I'm sure we'll do a Facebook Live specifically on that. Maybe one of the psychology team can do a Facebook Live specifically on that in the near future. So yeah, just looking at questions. Let me just scroll back up at the top of the questions. Thank you, people making nice comments. Your clinic made me realise a lot of things. Thank you. Didn't fix me, but revelations. Thank you, Audrey. Hopefully we can continue to help. Joanne, how do you know if you have ME? ME chronic fatigue is a diagnosis of exclusion, which is, I think, highly irritating for a lot of people. But what that basically means is if you don't have any other medical explanation for what's happening and you meet a set of symptoms and you've had them as an adult for more than 6 months and a teenager for more than 3 months, and different diagnostic criteria use different time periods, then you will get an ME chronic fatigue diagnosis. It's a completely shameful process, the way the whole thing works. We need recognition, definition of subgroups. We need research into biomarkers. And I'm sure I can rant on a separate Facebook Live about that. But I would always highly recommend anyone that's got symptoms that you don't self-diagnose and you push to get a GP diagnosis, because of course there are other explanations that could explain these symptoms which need to be ruled out, and that's a really important process. Hazel says, I think I've been trying so hard to get better that I've not actually been in a healing state, got myself all anxious and fed up, then today accepted a day of just chilling in bed, accept my feelings, and meditating feels so much better. Yeah, it's a funny one, Hazel, isn't it? It's like sometimes the harder you try to get better, weirdly what happens is you actually can push yourself more in the wrong direction. And it's a balance, because equally if you just are completely disengaged in the process, then often things won't change. I used to, in my younger, more provocative days, used to talk about it like the C word and the S word. The C word being not the word maybe you're thinking of, the word commitment, you have to commit, but you also have to have the S word, which is surrender. And that balance between commitment and surrender is an art for sure. Michelle, how can healing state be facilitated? That's a big part of the work we do at the clinic. I can certainly do a separate Facebook Live introducing some of those ideas. There's a bunch of stuff on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/freedomfromme. But it's probably a bit of a big question to get into briefly. Karen, will being in a healing state help other physical injury heal quicker? Possibly. I think it depends upon the injury. Something like a cut finger is probably just going to take the time it's going to heal. But I think certainly more complex injuries, being in a healing state definitely can help. Yeah, I think it's going to depend upon the situation. If something where the nervous system has an impact, it's definitely going to have an impact for sure. Thanks, Joanne. Debbie, does the NHS refer to your clinic? No, at the moment we are a private clinic. We're owned by a charity. So 100% of any profits made by the clinic go directly to our research program. We do get some off-the-record referrals, as it were, so GPs that can't refer through the NHS but will recommend the clinic. The reason why we're doing clinical trials is to build more evidence base to hopefully down the line be able to get NHS funding, but that's a long and complicated process. Colette, how to reach a healing state other than rest? So being in a healing state is different to just resting. It's about calming the nervous system, dealing with the thought processes that are triggering a stress state. Rest can be part of it, because if you're overextending what you're doing physically, that will trigger stress. But it's not as simple as just resting. I think there was a mini clip that one of the team put out from a video that I did recently, I think I saw on the newsletter, which was why being in the difference between you can't push recovery, you can't just rush your way to recovery, you have to heal your way to recovery. So that mini clip should be further down on this Facebook page, I would imagine. Where are you based in the UK? We're based in North London, but we do a lot of work by telephone and video Skype. We have patients in, I think this number's like years old, but it used to be like 35 countries around the world. I'm sure it's more than that these days. So we do a lot of distant work with people, either because it's too far to travel or because they're not well enough to travel. Definitely check out the optimumhealthclinic.com. We have a really good process of sending out free information packs, and also you can have a free 15-minute chat with one of the team. So there's lots of opportunity to get questions answered. If there's any other quick questions, you better start typing fast. Otherwise, I think that's all the questions answered for now. Please do also make suggestions of topics, things you'd like me to cover in the future. Thank you, Helene, for that. Tony, in terms of prices, I don't think they've changed, no, from memory. Certainly prices of sessions and 90-day program haven't changed in a few years now. Yeah, I don't think any of that's changed. But you can always check. If you want to ask a question like that, you can email inquiries@theoptimumhealthclinic.com and one of the team will come back to you. So next week, we're going to have a recovery story interview. So that will be same time next week. So Debbie, just do you treat CFS with fibromyalgia? So fibromyalgia we classify as different to CFS, but yes, we do also work with people with fibromyalgia as well, definitely. So definitely please do reach out. And then we are tentatively aiming to release our new documentary film on ME Awareness Day on the 12th of May. I say tentatively because I'm getting a rough cut tomorrow, and I don't want to promise anything till we just see how much further we've got to go with it. But we're certainly aiming towards that, so we'll be building up to that as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and if you post any more questions, I'll try and jump on later or in the morning. And yeah, thank you for watching everyone. Bye-bye.